that the entire world is holding its breath to see if the president of what is supposed to be the most powerful country in the world can make it through a 3-day summit without doing or saying something embarrassing or inappropriate.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. So, Stephanie, while Biden's dementia or Parkinson's or frail old man nap time disorder or whatever physical and mental health issue he has at the White House still continues to pretend does not exist, but it remains the number one topic of controversy in the news, Biden is once again on the center of the world stage this week as leaders from 32 countries are gathered in DC for the 75th annual NATO summit. And this year's summit is more important than ever because not only is everyone questioning Biden's faculties and his ability to lead the summit, much less America, as well as his age, which, by the way, Stephanie, did you know he's actually older than the summit itself?
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and there's this like pervasive fear that if Biden continues to show cognitive decline and Trump gets elected, the entire world is going to be like turned on its head because Trump has openly criticized NATO's agenda of the fact that like America continues to fund the never-ending war in Ukraine, which Biden in turn highlights as one of the victories of his presidency. And as a reminder, he has committed us to continue unquestioningly funding Ukraine for at least the next 10 years. So obviously, NATO doesn't want to see Biden fail because that would mean the US would likely stop funding their agenda. After all, as Biden pointed out earlier this week in his either the interview with George Stephanopoulos or the MSNBC interview, it's his incredible leadership that has been responsible for the expansion of NATO. And actually, Stephanie, didn't he say that he's the one who put NATO together?
Like he started it.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess to some extent, a little bit of what he said is partially true. He is responsible for the expansion of NATO because the Biden admin is responsible basically for initiating and supporting the war in Ukraine for the past 2.5 years. And it's because of the war in Ukraine that Finland and Sweden joined NATO during Biden's presidency. And it's because of the billions of dollars and advanced weapons that we continue to send to Ukraine that Biden continues to increase tensions between Russia and the United States, which basically has created the need for NATO expansion. And it is entirely because of the Biden admin that we are now on the brink of World War III. And we continue to push the boundaries of Russia's red line by sending more and more military assistance to Ukraine. All these controversial weapons that we initially pledged not to use. We said Ukraine couldn't use US weapons to strike targets in Russia's interior, but then we allowed that too. And we basically have a leader whose idea of leadership is allowing Zelensky to bully us and make demands that we cave and cater to with apologies and promises of more. And Biden has said he won't send US troops to Ukraine, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was next. So, yes, Biden can absolutely take credit for the expansion of NATO with America's policies of provoking war with Russia.
Yeah, the history books will look at that as what initiated World War III. Yeah. And can I just say, after looking at this summit, I finally put two and two together that NATO is the military-industrial complex. They're one and the same. It's where all the elites get together and figure out how they're going to spend our taxpayer dollars so that they can all profit.
Yeah.
So one person that I found some commentary on was Alaskan Senator Dan Sullivan, and he told the Morning Wire that we live in a very dangerous world and weakness is provocative. And it's very important that our adversaries don't think our commander-in-chief is asleep at the switch. But how could they not after the debate? So Sullivan had been meeting with NATO members and thinks that we need to shift the focus from just talking about Ukraine, which is literally all they want to talk about, to looking at authoritarian regimes as a whole, led by China. How like that's a real threat. And he said we need to address two issues. First, all NATO nations need to ramp up defense spending to 2%. This is exactly what Trump said when he was president, and he was holding them to it. he was saying pay your fair share or you're out. But of course, with Biden, they know they can get away with whatever they want. And Tara, can you believe that it's the US we're on another continent. We're spending well over $100 billion of our taxpayer dollars to protect Ukraine, but then the NATO allies that are in Europe, in Russia's backyard, aren't even spending 2%. Like, it is outrageous at this point in the game that this is still happening. And then, second, Sullivan said that Biden's energy policies put the West at risk because they might need to reach out to Russia for energy imports. And it's like, how crazy is that? We're in a proxy war with Russia. We're on the verge of a world war, but then they expect to get energy imported from Russia. Like, we have the biggest supply right here in the United States. On what planet does this make sense? It's something that China doesn't have. I mean, they would love to have all the natural resources that we have right here in the United States, but we refuse to drill. And so, like Trump says, the first thing he's going to do is drill, baby, drill. And I think it's important that people connect the two, because if we have to rely on places like Russia when we're on the verge of war, like, that's a disaster waiting to happen. So we need to be looking at energy along with like our national security.
Yeah, all of Biden's policies have put the United States at risk, from his border policies to his energy policies to his foreign policies, like everything. He is completely destroying the country. And honestly, it's like spinning the wheel of a slot machine every time he's in the spotlight. Like, what combination of behaviors are we going to see from Joe today? What are we going to see during the NATO summit? Is it going to be garbled, making no sense mumbling Joe? Easily distracted by shiny objects Joe? Unable to keep his eyes open because he didn't get a nap Joe? Dirty, like, frail old grandpa Joe? Defensive, defiant, shouting Joe? Evil, dark Brandon Joe? Like, a combination of all of these. Like, regardless of whatever excuses he gives or the White House gives after the fact about him being ill or jet lagged or tired or whatever, it's very clear that his behavior at any public appearance is going to be unpredictable and erratic, and it's going to depend on what stimulants or other aids he's being provided with before taking the stage or going on camera. And I'm going to guess that his handlers are going to double down on making sure they get the right dosage of whatever they give him, because this summit is critical for his campaign. It is literally a gamble every time. Except the one thing that we can be sure of is that Biden will do something embarrassing on the world stage. And this NATO summit so far has been no exception. But before we dive into that, Stephanie, I have to ask, did you see Peter Doocy's epic interaction with KJP on Tuesday?
I did. And can I
Okay.
just say, Peter Ducey, like, he is so good at what he does because he's always like friendly and smiling and like not nasty. And they make it sound like he's terrible. Some of the left-leaning reporters are way worse with her, but I think he did such a good job with this and calling it out.
Oh, I love him. And so if you guys didn't see it, Biden had recently made some statement, like a joke or whatever, about how he's sharper before 8 p.m. And reportedly, like, the White House isn't scheduling evening events for him because he needs to get enough sleep. So during this press conference on Tuesday, Peter Doocy asked KJP if Biden's committed to serving a full second term if he's reelected. And she said, yeah. And so then he says, quote, "We know the president says that his health is fine, but it's just his brain, and that he's sharpest before 8 p.m." And then before he could continue, KJP interrupts him, and she's like, yeah, that was a joke, and Biden's just being lighthearted. Everyone knows he likes to joke a lot. But Ducey didn't let up, and he said, quote, "Well, he said he's sharpest before 8 p.m. So say that the Pentagon at some point picks up an incoming nuke. It's 11 p.m. Who do you call? The First Lady?" End quote. And so, of course, KJP got irritated, and she started talking about his team of people that let him know about pertinent and important news, and someone would tell him. But honestly, like, that is a valid question. And I'm sure the leaders at the NATO summit are wondering the same thing. I mean, they have these dinners and social events every evening after the meetings. Is Biden like going to disappear and, wander up to his bedroom by 8 p.m.? I'm surprised he actually managed to get through the opening remarks on Tuesday mostly unscathed. But what pisses me off is like he's being praised for sounding forceful and strong. Although he did get caught reading instructions off the teleprompter again, but then they tried to hide it like with applause. But when reporters have to sing the president's praise by calling attention to the fact that he only made a few errors when reading a prepared speech directly from a teleprompter, like that in itself is a very pathetic admission. And despite his reported success with this opening speech, the bottom line is like a president should not be congratulated for getting through a fucking prepared speech that he didn't even write and probably couldn't even give you a summary of if you asked him 5 minutes later to do that because he doesn't know what he fucking said in the first place. Like the true test of a leader is not their ability to get through a prepared speech. It's how they perform under pressure, under stress, off the cuff, in the moment when like critical decisions have to be made. And Biden has proven time and time again that he can't fucking do that and he's always asleep. He's not a leader. He's a fucking feeble puppet that can barely follow written instructions on cue cards. And we shouldn't be celebrating his ability to read from these cue cards or a teleprompter with minimal mistakes. And yet, that's what everyone is celebrating in the news the last 2 days is how strong his opening speech was. And I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but it's fucking maddening to me that this is being celebrated or even accepted by anyone, like anyone, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever you believe in, like this shit is not okay. And frankly, we're recording this podcast before the summit is even over. So I am guaranteed there's going to be plenty more that happens than what we talk about today. But my point is that it's absolutely fucking shameful and humiliating that the entire world is holding its breath to see if the president of what is supposed to be the most powerful country in the world can make it through a 3 day summit without doing or saying something embarrassing or inappropriate. Like we have a total fucking sham government.
Well, yeah, and that comment that you read about like him making 3 errors, it's like, okay, if he can't get through reading a teleprompter, they need to be asking who can run the country, not like, is he fit to run? No, who's currently running the country? Is it Jill
Mhm.
Biden? Is it KJP? Is it Kamala? Is it the Pentagon? Like, we need some answers because clearly this guy doesn't have the cognitive ability to make any rational decisions. And no one's really asking like that question. But yeah, like this NATO summit seems to be the event that will determine Biden's fate because everyone's watching closely to see if he can handle it. The Democrats are like ready to boot him out. They're just like waiting for him to fuck it up. And of course, he already fucked it up numerous times. So let's start with the first clip that I have, which is him once again, typically fumbling his words.
This alliance in one of the most consequential periods in its history. I realize I've.
Oh, wait, hang on. Wrong clip. Hold on. This one.
It will be the 32nd freestanding, have 32 freestanding members standing together.
So like he couldn't even say 32 members. And of course, like the audience, they must have those cue cards where they hold up like laughter, like when he messes up, because that's what they did. Every time he messed up, the audience would just start laughing. But that's not all. Biden went off script as he was about to award the chief of the alliance the Medal of Freedom. And he starts talking about the chief's wife. And this clip has gone viral on social media because people are saying that it sounds like Biden said he's like effing the chief's wife. I'll let you guys decide. I don't think he said that, but either way, it's freaking embarrassing. So listen to this.
This alliance in one of the most consequential periods in its history. I realize I was talking to your wife. I personally asked you to extend your service. Forgive me. And you.
Okay, so I think he said he was talking to his wife, but then he like fumbles and then he's like, forgive me. And then everyone starts laughing. And it's just like, what? Like it's so absolutely inappropriate, whatever he said. It's just embarrassing. And like, I can't imagine that was part of the planned speech that was in front of him. And just imagine if Trump did that. If Trump is like giving someone the Medal of Freedom and starts talking about the guy's wife, like it's just on what planet is that okay? And so then after that, there was this photo op where all the leaders get on stage together and the press can take photos. During the photo, a reporter started shouting at Biden in front of all these world leaders, asking if Pelosi is still standing behind him to stay in the race. And like it just adds to the embarrassment of our country having a president that everyone knows isn't capable of leading the country. And the fact that a reporter did this tells me that the gloves are off and like they're going to keep attacking Biden to push him out. And they're getting the okay to do that. Like they try to prep these reporters. And I guarantee the Dems like planted that. And then you had an MSNBC interview with Ian Bremmer, who's the president of the Eurasia Group. And he said that the leaders that he encountered don't think Biden can serve another 4 years. And this isn't news to them, just like it's not news to us. We've been talking about this for years. So at least they're calling it out.
Yeah, and reportedly, like the biggest test for Biden is going to be the solo press conference that he gives on Thursday night, which unfortunately we cannot comment on because we're recording this episode on Thursday afternoon before his press conference happens. But you can bet he's going to be like hopped up on performance enhancing drugs or whatever they give him, and he's going to be reading from a teleprompter. And this is apparently the most high stakes test of his fitness for office because I can't fucking believe this, Stephanie. It's going to be his first solo press conference since November of last year. That's 8 fucking months where the president of the United States hasn't done a solo press conference. 8 months. And it's going to
During a
be
time
only
where there's like war breaking out. Like,
yeah, right.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's going to be only his 15th solo press conference of his entire presidency for the past 4 years. Like, that is completely insane and frankly unacceptable. And according to CNN, like, this is going to be an opportunity for him to show off his skills answering questions in an unscripted setting. But does anyone really believe this is going to be unscripted and that he's actually going to answer questions that haven't been pre-approved with rehearsed answers? It has been revealed time and again that he only takes pre-approved fucking questions. Just a few days ago, some chick got fired from some major news outlet. I can't remember which one it was because there's so much shit going on in the news. But she had a scripted interview with Biden, and like the outlet she works for is like, we're supposed to be doing independent journalism, and that's not independent. So she was out. And it's like, it's too big of a gamble for Biden to be put on stage with a microphone and free access to the press. Like, they can pretend all they want, but we all know that he's only going to be answering pre-approved questions, and then they're going to usher him off the stage as quickly as possible. And so, aside from Biden, like, what is the focus of this year's summit? Because all anyone's talking about is Biden. And obviously, the big topic is the push for continued financial aid to Ukraine and for NATO countries to increase their defense spending, which, like you said earlier, Stephanie, this should have been done a long fucking time ago. And Biden has pledged to provide Ukraine with 5 new strategic air defense systems. They're getting F-16 fighter jets from Denmark and the Netherlands, Patriot batteries from Germany and Romania, and long-range air defense systems from Italy. And during Biden's opening speech on Tuesday, he said that Ukraine is going to be receiving hundreds of additional interceptors over the next year. And he said, quote, "The United States will make sure that when we export critical air defense interceptors, Ukraine goes to the front of the line. They will get this assistance before anyone else gets it," end quote. Yeah, they're probably going to get it before, our own fucking country even gets protection assistance. And the full plan won't be presented until after we record this episode, but reportedly, we're also going to be providing an army garrison in Germany, the United States, with hundreds of staff members to help provide logistics and deliveries for Ukraine. NATO is committing to sending more than $40 billion to Ukraine over the next year to, quote, "provide sustainable levels of security assistance for Ukraine to prevail," end quote. The NATO alliance has also put out a statement saying that Ukraine is now on an irreversible path to NATO membership, even though they're not going to grant them membership until the war with Russia is over. But the declaration states that Ukraine has made concrete progress on necessary democratic, economic, and security reforms. And as long as Ukraine continues to do this, NATO will continue to support Ukraine on its irreversible path to full Euro Atlantic integration, including NATO membership. And according to the LA Times, Zelensky was warned by NATO not to make a public display of his anger and frustration about not being accepted into NATO right now, like he did during last year's summit. But of course, Zelensky is also in Washington this week, and he's giving his own press conferences about how NATO and especially America must continue to take faster action to be stronger and more uncompromising in defending Ukraine's democracy. And even though he's been given this new aircraft, it's not enough. And he needs at least 100 more to begin to even match Russia's air presence. So I can only imagine that he's most likely also bullying NATO behind the scenes into forking over more money and weapons when he's not on camera. And I guess he was asked by a reporter if he supported Biden or Trump, and he declined to answer. And he just gave a statement about how the world is waiting for what November might bring. But it's like we all know, he knows it's critical for his sugar daddy Biden to remain in office if he wants to keep getting those fat American checks in the, coming from our taxpayer dollars. And I was reading in Scripps News that Ukraine is even opening up its own office in Washington to promote its needs to the government, the US government, and defense companies.
That's because Ukraine is becoming the US government. Like, remember that Tucker interview in Australia where he said, like, the Ukrainians are wiped out. I mean, if this whole thing is what they say it is, they've wiped out an entire generation of young Ukrainians. Who are they replacing it with? The freaking government. It's like a government base right on the border of Russia. And I mean, it's just maddening that they've checked off the democratic metrics or whatever it was you had said. They haven't even had an election. They're refusing to hold an election. Like, this is so absurd. Everyone sees it. And again, like, this is another reason why NATO is the military industrial complex. Like, it's so maddening. And so, yeah, like, of course, Zelensky is going to push for, Ukraine to join NATO. But like, we all know that would clearly provoke Putin and drag the US into the war. Like, that marks the moment where it's official that we're in World War III. And Putin has clearly stated that, but these idiots keep pushing forward with it. And of course, this is what the military industrial complex wants because they profit off of it. But is this really what our allies want? Because, I mean, think about it. They're a lot closer to Russia than we are. And they need to think about their national security over the next 4 years if Biden stays in office. And like, even ABC News reported that sources told them that many of the conversations that were taking place behind closed doors at the summit were about Biden's competence and how it was completely overshadowing political conversations. And it's like, just put yourself in the shoes of our European allies. Like, if Biden stays in, we're sure to end up in World War III, which means like they're screwed in Europe. But they don't want Trump either, right? Because he flat out is like saying, if you don't pay your fair share, you're out. So I don't know. They're in a tough situation, but like, do you really think they have any confidence whatsoever in Biden to handle a world war? It's like, of course
No,
not.
no. And I keep seeing more and more articles about how European leaders are finally like publicly voicing their concerns about Biden's abilities. There was an article in Politico yesterday, which again is a very liberal news outlet, and they were talking about how NATO officials are saddened by how all this focus on Biden has taken away from the fact that this is supposed to be like a celebratory summit for NATO because it's their 75th anniversary. And hardly anyone's talking about what's actually being discussed at the summit. All the attention's on Biden. And like, what is his next gaffe going to be, right? Even when the world leaders first arrived and they had a chance to give their opening remarks before the first meeting started on Wednesday, reporters were focused on questions about Biden's performance at the debate. It wasn't about topics related to NATO, and it was reportedly like very awkward for everybody. The prime minister of Greece just said he wasn't going to comment at all. The president of Finland called the political polarization in the United States toxic. And then most other like world leaders just gave these very polite responses about respecting America's democratic process, like very diplomatic answers, obviously. Several made comments on their hopefulness that, like, if Trump is elected, that he'll maintain a positive NATO alliance. Because apparently now 23 of the 32 member countries have reached the shared commitment of spending 2% on their GDP defense. But a senior European diplomat who was asked to remain anonymous, he told Politico, quote, "We would prefer a more stable situation in the US. It's a very weird feeling to be in Europe listening to the president of the United States, and you're more stressed about whether he will go off script than being excited to listen to the leader of the free world. You're worried if he knows which direction he's going, or whether he's going to fail, or what he's going to forget, or if he'll say North Korea when he means South Korea. It's just a weird experience," end quote. Like, I would say it's a little more than weird, wouldn't you, Stephanie? Like, let's call it what it is. This is fucking dangerous, not only for the United States, but for the entire world. And it's clear that this concept is not lost on most of Europe. Another NATO official who also asked to remain anonymous said, quote, "All the Americans are looking for at this summit is the photo op of Biden with allies. We're really concerned that the world will essentially be leaderless for several months, and then we don't know what comes after that," end quote. So,
Yeah. And they're all thinking like, well, what's worse, Biden or Kamala? Like that's probably the conversation that's taking place at the
of
summit.
course. Yeah. And like, just as a side note, with, NATO aside, the left is still continuing to just flip on him like left and right. Okay. I don't know if you saw like George Clooney, he hosted that major fundraiser for Biden, like what, 3 weeks ago in Hollywood. They
Yep.
raked in over 30 million for his campaign. And he just wrote an op-ed in the New York Times calling on Biden to drop out of the race. You've got more and
You know
more
how pissed you'd be if you donated money at that fundraiser
I
and then this
know.
asshole is saying like he needs to drop out?
Yeah, I love him, but he needs to go. And then, like, more and more Democrat leaders are coming out. Like, even Gretchen Whitmer, she's like the far left governor of Michigan. She said he should take a cognitive test. And she's just one of several Democrat leaders who publicly came out this week and are saying that Biden should not be the nominee. There are now 15 Democrat members of Congress who are publicly calling on Biden to step down for the good of the country so the Democrat Party can choose another candidate. And so I don't see this letting up anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think, and just listening to a lot of different perspectives, I think if they have any chance of winning, Biden has to like voluntarily step down like before the convention, which is in August. Like Pelosi was like, "Oh, I'll support whatever he decides." But like she's clearly like making it sound like he better decide, to step down. But yeah, I did see that about Clooney, and like Trump had just a great response to that. I mean, he kind of rambled on, but the last line of what he posted is he's like, "Crooked Joe Biden didn't save our democracy. He brought our democracy to its knees. Clooney should get out of politics and go back to television. Movies never really worked for him." Like, I love this guy. But like, okay, I want to end it on a funny note. So, you know how they were bickering in the debate over golf and like who is a better golfer? So Trump like publicly challenged Biden to a golf match and said if Trump loses, he said, "I will donate $1 million to the charity of your choice." And of course, Biden declined. And they just said something like, "We're not going to play into these antics or whatever." And it's like, yeah, because he probably can't even swing a club at this point. Like it would just be embarrassing. But I love that
He would
Trump is
get
like
lost. He'd get
pushing the button.
lost on the golf course.
He
Like,
would.
he wouldn't even know where he was.
The Secret Service would have to be like moving him around. It's, oh my gosh. It's like, how did ever, ever did you think that America would be in this situation where we would be talking about a president getting lost on a golf course? I mean,
Yeah, I know.
it's so bad. But yeah, we'll keep everyone posted. And I think between now, we've got what, a few weeks between now and August, we'll know if Biden's going to stay in or drop out, or if something mysteriously will happen to him, because I'm telling you, like, these people want him gone and they are not good people. So he better watch his back, but we'll see. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll keep you posted on all the drama and see you back here next time. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.